पेरेंट्स को थोड़ी ना बोल देगी वो कहेगी ये बिना उन्हें पूछे नहीं कर रहा पेरेंट्स को बोलेगी ये थोड़ी ना उनका नाम लेके कह देगी कि वो मना करता है
Okay guys, so let's start. So today what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and talk about what are exceptions. Okay, so what do you mean by an exception? So the best example of an exception is let's say you're watching a cricket match and sometimes the rain comes and the cricket match just stops, right? So that is what the exception is all about. Okay, let's say what happens is whenever an exception comes in the program, the whole program stops working. It halts. Okay, the whole program halts. That is what the exception is. Okay, so the whole program is going to go ahead and stop. That is what the exception is all about. Now the next thing that we have in the exception is, now if you handle that exception well, okay, then if you don't want that, okay, if the program has you don't want to stop abruptly, if you don't want the program to stop abruptly and you want to continue with the rest of the things, then what you do is you have we handle that exception. Okay, so just like cricket match, that it doesn't mean it's the same, you play the same cricket match, rain might come or might not come. So the thing is, the code, in the code, exception is not like it always will be there. There might be some scenarios in which the exception occurs, but the whole thing is when an exception occurs, you don't want to stop your program. You still want to go ahead and continue with the rest of the program, and you want to just cache the exception. You just don't want to say, give a blank screen and okay, everything is broken. You don't want to do that. You want to handle the exception. So first, let's take a look at what is an exception is, and there are different kinds of exceptions. Okay, so let's say if I go back here to the developer console, this is my developer console here, and in this developer console you have, what we're going to do here is we'll go ahead and say file new, and we say something like open execute window. And in this case, you know that whenever we create a merchandise item, you need to provide the required fields, right? You need to provide the required fields. So let's say if I wanted to create a merchandise and if I don't provide the value for that required field, okay, so this is m is equals to new of merchandise underscore c, that is what we have. And if you do something like this, is equals to this one. Okay, now here what you say is, let's say if I try to insert this merchandise, if I try to go ahead and insert my merchandise item, now this time I will get an exception. I will say that it's a DML exception, and what happened was so this was the line that caused the exception. You're trying to put something which you're trying to insert a merchandise item and without giving the values for the required fields, right? So but this line is fine. I still want to go ahead and I wanted to continue with the rest of the program. Even if the second line gave me an exception, I still want to print this exception. I still want to print this new line, and I wanted to go ahead and print all the rest of the program, because there's nothing wrong with this program, right? The rest of the program is fine. So this is what so now what happens is if you go ahead and execute, nothing is going to get printed because of this exception that occurred. So how we are going to handle this exception? Now we can handle this exception using a try-catch block. Now what do you mean by a try-catch block? Try-catch block means whatever thing that you think is going to call the exception or might result to, whatever the code that you think is suspicious that can cause exception, you put that inside of the try block. Okay, so whatever the thing that you think that, okay, this particular piece of code might result to an exception, okay, then you put that code in that try block. And if the exception occurred, there will be the corresponding catch block. Okay, so let's say you don't have to remember what are the different types of exceptions are there, but just the most important and the most used and most thrown exceptions. So try is the piece of block. You cannot have try. So try is the piece of is the block in which you're going to put a code which might result into an exception. Okay. Try is a piece of code which might result into an exception. Okay, that is what it is. Try is a piece of code which might result into an exception. And if that exception is thrown, in case if the exception is thrown, then the catch block will run. Not every time the catch block is going to run. The catch block will only run if this particular piece of code has thrown an exception. Okay, so if this particular piece of code, the try block has thrown an exception, then if let's say the exception that is thrown is DML exception and you're catching the DML exception. So you can have multiple catch blocks with different kinds of exception, because exception can be of different type. It can be a null pointer exception, it can be a DML exception, or it can be any kind of exceptions can be there. Okay, so with one try blocks you can have multiple catch blocks. Okay, you can have as many catch blocks as you want, which holds different kinds of exceptions, okay, which are used to hold different kinds of exceptions. So right now, let's say this, you know that, okay, this piece of code might result into an exception. So what you're going to do is you're going to put this inside the try block. You're going to go ahead and write this piece of code, because this might result in an exception. You put this in the try block. Now, in this case, initially what happened, if you run this code, what happened was everything got stopped and nothing got printed, right? These lines did not got printed. But now you know that this piece of code might result into an exception. So now what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and try to catch this exception. And you know what is the exception type? Even if you don't know, there is a generic exception type called exception. You can put any kind of exception in this generic block. Okay, and you can say, now here you can just go ahead and catch this exception. Means here you can say that system.debug. If an exception got occurred, you can say this is the catch block. Okay, and what will it say? If you want to display what kind of error messages, you can just say display this is, and then you can say e.of get message. So you have this try block, and then you have this merchandise __ c m is equals to new merchandise. Okay, and then you have this insert of m, and then we have is this catch block. Okay, catch is equals to catch is, then we have this exception. So what happens here is, if this particular piece of code has thrown the exception, okay, which in this case it is going to throw, so then what will happen? This piece of code will get executed, and then it will not go ahead and just stop it. It will go ahead and continue with the rest of the program. So in this case, you are very well know that, okay, this piece of code is going to throw an exception because the required field values you have not provided. The required field is price and quantity, and you have not provided the value for that. That's why it will throw an exception. You're trying to insert something with null values, which is not allowed, and that's why it will throw an exception. So this particular catch block will handle the exception. Either you can define the DML exception here, or you can just put it generic. So this is like a bigger cup in which you can put all this different kinds of exceptions. So this is a generic exception. You can even write it here, the corresponding exception that will get thrown. So if let's say there is this, if let's say the exception that is thrown by this piece of code is not DML, then what will happen, and you have a catch block like this which only accepts DML exceptions, so then this catch block will not get caught. Okay, so now if I execute this program, what do you think will be the output of the program, guys? What do you think? What do you think? Just make a guess. I know it might be wrong, but just make a guess. What do you think will be the output of the program? Are you guys there? Did you first tell me, did you got, yeah. So this is the DML exception. So this is a catch to handle the DML exception. And you know that this piece of code throws an exception of type DML. Remember we saw that earlier? Okay, so what I told you was, let's say if I go ahead and get rid of this whole code. Okay, if I just go ahead and comment out this code. Okay, and then I say something like this. Okay, merchandise underscore underscore C, M is equals to new merchandise, insert of M. Okay, if you do something like this, then what will happen? You know what is the exception. It's going to go ahead and execute because this is commented out. Nothing is going to get printed. So you know the exception is of type DML exception. So you are knowing that this particular piece of code is throwing a DML exception. So what you have done is you have created a catch block to handle that exception of the DML type. So now we'll get rid of this comments here. So now what is the exception? So then you already have a catch block to handle this DML exception. Okay. So this code is throwing in the exception. You are having a catch block to handle this, and then rest of the code will execute. If you didn't have this try catch block, and then what will happen? The whole program will be stopped right away once it encountered the exception. Did you get it? Abhinav, did you know what is exception now? What is an exception? So what do you think will be the output of this program? Can somebody tell me what's going to be the output of this program? I'm waiting in your answer, guys. You need to think about it and tell me what you think will be the output of the program. Jet, this is the only line you think is going to get printed? Exactly. The whole thing will get printed because this is going to get printed because that catch block was called because this threw an exception. But the whole purpose of handling the exception is so that you can continue with the rest of the program. So this line will get printed and these three lines will get printed also because you have handled the exception. If you would not have handled the exception, then this lines will not get printed. This is why we have a try catch block. So now if you execute the program, if you go to debug only, this is the catch block insert fail, and this e dot of get message is giving you the whole message. That's why this e dot of get message is returning you. But then it continued with the rest of the program. But if you did not have this exception, if you did not have handled this exception, then and if you just tried to did something like this, if you have just did something this way, and then you have the rest of the statements, these rest of the statements will not get printed. Now tell me what's going to be the output of the program. If I just execute this, now what do you think will be the output of the program? Everything else is commented out, only this line of the code will execute, these lines. Exactly. The code is not going to run and it's just going to stop it right away with throwing you an exception. So did you know what is the difference between handling the exception and not handling the exception? So here, instead of saying something like this, instead of saying specifically, because sometimes you don't even know what kind of exception will get thrown, right? You're not, because it's too many exceptions and you don't know exactly what. So what you can do here is you don't have to write exactly a DML exception. You can just write exception, which is like a generic exception in which any other kind of exception can be fitted. Just like you have S object in which any other kind of object will get fit into. That's why we have this exception. So any kind of exception will get fit into this one. Okay, so now what we're going to have is, so this is going to get stored here. Go ahead and execute the program and it is going to go ahead and give you the same result because now the catch block is of type DML exception. Okay. So next thing that we have here is any questions on this one. Now tell me what's going to be the output. But now if I go ahead and give the output is equals to 12 and quantity underscore underscore C is equals to 100. Now tell me what's going to be the output of the program. Now what do you think will be the output of the program? Okay, think again. Do you think exception will occur in this case? Where are you printing the quantity? Priyanka, where is the code that prints the quantity? I want to see where is the line that prints the quantity. Is there any line that says print the price and the quantity? Then why will it print it? It will insert, right? Okay. But I want to know, I got it. It will insert, it will not display. That's good. But what will be the output of the program? See guys, I told you the catch block will only run if the exception is thrown. Now in this program, do you think an exception will be thrown? Yes or no? Do you think in this program will the exception will be thrown or not? No. So if the exception, why the exception is not thrown? Because you are providing the value of the required fields. Is that correct? So the required fields are price and quantity, and that's where you are providing the values for that. So no exception will be thrown, right? So if the exception is not thrown, then the catch block will not get executed. Because if there is no error, there is no error. If there is no not the error, but if there is no exception, the catch block will not get called. So this program will go ahead and insert the merchandise item, whatever the item is, and then this block of code will not get executed. Will not, because no exception has thrown. The exception, if an exception was thrown, then only this particular block would have thrown. So it will continue with the rest of the program. So it will print these lines and it will successfully insert this item. Got it? No catch block will get called. There is no catch block. Abhinav, did you get it? Yes.
This is so hard to understand because I have missed last yesterday's some concepts. I didn't go on through that right because you didn't upload video yet. So I have some gap between those before topics and this topic. So I'm not able to catch this.
Okay, so what did you miss last class? Were you not there last class?
No, I was there, but in between, my system got hanged up. I missed around 42 minutes class.
Oh, okay. So what did you not understood?
So yeah, as for understood of this exception is
okay, so okay,
it stops
insert So you have, because this is all new, the try and this is all new, but you have confusion in this one. Abhinav, are you confused in what is this merchandise?
No, yes. Because yesterday I think you have created something in merchandise yesterday. So
Yeah.
I just like when you were creating, my system got hanged up.
Okay.
After that, I didn't like. I
Okay,
just
that's
followed your class like when I, yeah.
okay. So what I did yesterday was this whole application I installed from somewhere. Okay, merchandise. So this is like just we have those position underscore whatever the custom object. This is one of the custom object that is there in Salesforce, merchandise underscore C, which I created. Okay, I have not created this application. I did it before this class. Okay, yesterday's class, so that it'll save us time. So I've installed this application. Now this is what our Salesforce looks like. So this is the warehouse application I have, and this is the merchandise item. This is one of the object in the, and this is another object we have. This is merchandise object. This is invoices object. Now, as you can see, if I wanted to create a new merchandise, it asks me for these three things: name, price, and quantity. Okay, so all of these are required because you see this red sign here. That means it's a required field. That means if you don't provide the value of any of these fields, you will not be able to save this record, right? If you are not going to provide the value of this particular field, you will not be able to save this record. Did you get it? Okay, so similarly, what I'm doing here is I'm going to go ahead and say merchandise underscore C M is equals to new. So this is like, just like we have constructing an object, right? How do you construct? You construct by using a new operator, right? And then you provide that particular object, particular class here, merchandise underscore C. And what you do here is, so this is your whole object and price, and this is what we have is the quantity. Okay, so we have price and we have the quantity. Okay, so you're providing the value of these two things, price and quantity here. So price is equals to 12 and quantity is equals to 100. So these are the required fields. Okay, and so I'm providing the value and I'm just doing an insert operation. Means it will insert this particular record into the database. So now if I go back here, if I run this program, what have happened is it will go ahead and insert that record. That's what it is doing. Okay, but if you don't provide the value of these values, if you don't provide price and quantity, even if it's a required field, that's why it is giving us an exception. Okay, if you don't provide this, in this case, it's going to give you an exception because those are the required fields. You have to answer those fields. That's why it will give you an exception. But if you provide the value, it will not give you an exception. And then this is the command to insert into the Salesforce. So when this insert M, what is M? M is this whole record. Okay, and now I'm saying insert M means it will insert it into the Salesforce database. Did you get it? Got it? Now tell me what is going to be the output of this program. So try catch is used to handle the exception. So if the exception is thrown by your piece of code, then the corresponding catch block will be called. So if the exception that is thrown is of null type and you have a catch block which handles the exception of null type, then that particular catch block will be thrown. If there is an exception or list exception or something related to the list and you have a catch block which takes list exception, then that particular catch block will be called. Okay, let's say if your code is throwing a DML exception and you're having a catch block of list exception, that's not going to make a sense. That's not going to, because you don't have the corresponding catch block. You need to have the corresponding catch block, or you can say something like exception, which is like a generic block which can take any kind of exception. Okay, are you getting my point? If yes, answer this question. What is going to be the output of this program? Priyanka. Abhinav, why you think the catch block will be called? See, Abhinav, the catch block will only get called if the exception is thrown. In this case, the exception will not be thrown because you're providing the value, whatever he's asking for you, and you're giving those values. That's why exception will not be thrown, and that's why the catch block will not get called. Where is the confusion?
No, I was thinking that like price and quantity were like not exact things we have to give at that place. So I think there may be a null here. So that's why
No, this is the
I was
exact
thinking
thing that
that.
it needs, and you're providing that exact thing. So no exception is getting thrown, no catch block will be called, only these lines will get called, and this is going to insert the merchandise item.
Then the output will be how are you?
Exactly,
And those
exactly.
three like
The three debug statements will get printed. So if you go ahead and execute this piece of code, it's just going to give you these last three statements, okay? And it's not going to call the catch block, okay? Did you get it? Now, let's say you're saying I have a catch block, okay? This is the exception, okay? And instead of this exception that is thrown, now what is it? See guys, in this case, you think the exception will be thrown?
no.
No. Why do you think
Yes.
exception will not be thrown?
Because we didn't assign any value there. Right?
So you're saying exception will not be thrown?
Like will thrown like the output would be this. This is the catch block exception list exception.
Okay, well answer to me. Will exception will be thrown or it will not be thrown? Tell me. Don't go to the next step. I'm asking, will exception will be thrown or not?
Thrown.
Okay, Priyanka, what do you think? Unmute yourself, Abhinav. Sorry, mute yourself. Priyanka, what's going to be, will the exception will be thrown or not? Yes, okay. What is the name of the exception that will be thrown? How do you know a list exception is thrown? Didn't you see there was an exception of type DML exception? Data manipulation language exception is thrown. Just because I have a catch block of list exception, that doesn't mean my exception is of type list. Exception is of, because you're having this problem when you're inserting. Inserting is related to data manipulation. So the exception that will be thrown is a data manipulation exception. And the catch block that you have is of list exception, which is like not going to work. It's not going to work. You don't have a catch block which handles that kind of exception that is thrown by this piece of code. So this particular catch block will not make any sense. So this exception will not get caught. Are you getting? This exception will not get caught, and what will happen is it will throw the exception because you do not have a catch block to handle the exception. That's why no matter what, it will still halt right there. Are you getting, guys? This is a very important topic. That's why I'm putting a little more stress on here. You need to have it clear, crystal clear. Got it? So you need to know what kind, see, you don't have to remember all hundreds of exceptions that's going to throw, but these are very common exceptions, and you need to know what kind of code might result into what kind of exception, and then if you have the corresponding catch block. Now, if instead of say list exception, now tell me what will happen. Now, do you think this catch block will get called or not? What will be the output of the program? No, what is going to be the output of the program? Will it print these 3 lines and this line, or which lines will get printed? Okay, Priyanka and Abhinav. In this case, the exception is of DML type, but the catch block that you have is of exception type, which is like a bigger bucket, and any kind of exception can be put into a bigger bucket. So even if in that case this piece of code will get executed, because DML exception is also of type exception, list exception is also of type exception. So even this particular piece of code is throwing a type of a type DML exception. You have a catch block of exception which has a bigger bucket, and you can store this exception, so you can handle this exception using this exception type. So this piece of code will get executed and it will continue with the rest of the line because you were able to successfully handle the exception. So the output is going to be this line, and then all these 3 lines will get printed. Did you get it? Okay. Now if I go ahead and execute, it's going to print all those 3 lines and then the one with the catch block. Because guys, see, S object, you can store a position object in it. Any kind of object can be stored in S object. Similarly, any type of exception can be thrown in a bigger bucket of exception. That's why that particular catch block was called. But if you had a catch block of list exception and you're throwing a DML exception, in that case you are not handling it, because the exception of type DML will not be caught by the list exception. Are you getting my point here? Okay, are you getting it? Now, next thing is, if I do something like this. Now tell me, now in this case guys, what's happening is you are trying to insert a merchandise item. Okay, merchandise __ C is equals to merchandise __ C. This is going to be the merchandise item. Okay, now this is throwing a DML exception. Now you have a bigger bucket before, so you have 2 catch block, which is fine. You can have as many try catch, you might have, with one try you can have multiple catch blocks. Okay. Now here, if I go ahead and execute this piece of code, what is happening here guys is you're putting a bigger bucket before the smaller bucket. Okay, see, DML exception catch is only going to handle the type of DML. But do you think this piece of code will ever get executed? No. Why? Because everything will automatically get caught here. Because if this particular piece of code has thrown DML, it will go ahead and call this piece of code, because this particular catch block, if the exception is thrown, because any kind of exception can be catched by this. So this piece of code is not even going to execute anytime, because it will never execute. Why? Because everything will automatically be caught here. So this is a syntax error. It won't even let you run this. But if you go ahead and put this line above here, what will happen if this particular code has thrown a DML exception, then this particular piece of code will get executed. If there was another exception, let's say if there was an exception which is of list, let's say I'm creating a list here, list of integer li is equals to new of list of type integer. Okay, and then list dot of add 6. Okay, and then you're adding this element, and then you're trying to okay. So what I'm doing here is, guys, so I'm writing this piece of code, okay? So what I'm trying to do here is, now I'm going to give merchandise underscore underscore C M is equals to, and I'm going to give price. So you have merchandise underscore underscore C, M is equals to new of merchandise, then this is the M, list of integers, list of add. Now what happening here is, now in this piece of code, this particular, when you're creating an object of this type, this will not get executed. This is not going to throw any exception, right? You're trying to add and insert in a merchandise element. Do you have any question? Yeah.
No, it's not a question, it's a request actually. You know, after this class, like, as soon as possible, please try to after this video, because you know I will like pause it and I will try to understand when I see
Okay.
this video.
Okay. I will make
So
sure.
it
I will
would be
make.
easy
Okay.
for-
Okay. Definitely. I'm
And
so
one
sorry about yesterday.
that's okay, right? One more thing, like I want, I have a request that I want a small assignment on this topic, because by practicing it, I may get someone.
Okay.
Because you know it is very like I'm trying to understand the whole code you're typing here, but you know it's like it's out of my mind. I can't catch that.
Okay.
Because I don't have any idea about what's going on here and the coding or not. The four topics are fine, I can understand, but since I've missed my straight topic, right? There's a reason I think I'm not going to give this.
Okay. Okay. So I will not cover anything else beyond this today. I'll upload the I'll upload the classes, but let's just finish this whole exception stuff, okay? And then if you have any questions, we'll talk about it in the next class, and I'll make sure I upload everything today. Okay? I'll try to do it. Okay. So here, guys, what I'm trying to do here is, so Priyanka, can you tell me what's going on? Is your computer okay? Can you talk? Can I listen? Can I hear you?
I think we can have created a list of I1 and I2, right?
List of I1, I2, where do you see I1, I2? So what I've done here is I'm first trying to insert, yeah, let me go ahead and go walk you through. So in this first line, in line number 3, I'm trying to create a merchandise item and I'm providing the value of the price and quantity, okay? So which is that's all we required. So this particular, and then I'm inserting that record into the database. So everything is going smooth till here, no exception is thrown because everything what is required you're providing. At line number 5, you're trying to create an integer list, means it's a list which will take only integer values. At line number 6, you're adding 6 into that list. So the name of the list is li and you have 6 in it. Okay. Now at I, and now you're trying to retrieve the value from index of 0. So you know that whenever you try to add any element in the list, it starts with index of 0, right? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 6 will be added at index of 0. Okay. So at I1, the value will be 6, right? But I2, you're trying to access an element at index of 1, but there is no element at index of 1 because there's only one item in the list and you're trying to access the second item. So this line is going to throw an exception. Okay, this line is going to throw an exception, and this time the exception is not of type DML, it is an exception related to the list. So the exception that will be thrown here will be a list exception. Okay, but so you have two catch blocks. One catch block only catches DML exception. Okay, so in this, the exception that is thrown at this line is not of DML type, it is of list type. Okay, it's a list exception. So this particular catch block will not get executed because this only handles the exception of type DML. Okay, and here, so next we have another catch block which is of exception type, which is a bigger bucket. So any kind of exception can be catched by this exception type. So this particular catch block will get executed. Okay, and once the exception has been caught or has been handled, it will continue with the rest of the program. Are you getting my point? So tell me, what do you think, Priyanka, is going to be the output? And Ravi, what do you think will be the output of this program? Exactly. Very good, Priyanka. So only what will happen? The line number 16 will get printed because the second catch block will get created. Okay, and then the rest of the three lines will get executed because you have already handled the exception and it will continue with the rest of the program. Okay. But if you had a line here, do you think this line will get executed? Do you think
Yes,
this line?
it will.
Huh?
Yes, it will.
Who is this? Ravi?
Yes.
Why you think this will get executed?
Okay. It will not execute. Yeah. After getting error, it will just go to the catch block.
Exactly. It will only go to the catch block and it will continue from after the catch block. It won't
Yes.
say that come here and then go back here. No. It will stop right away and go to the catch block and then continue with the rest of the program after the catch block. Got it? So this line will not get executed. So if I go back here, so this is the catch block. See, exception list got called, not the other one. Not the DML was called. Excuse me, this one was got called. Hi, how are you? How are you, Deepika? And the rest of the three lines. It did not print Deepika Olive because there was an exception thrown at this line. Now tell me what's going to be the output of the program. You can just give me line numbers. You don't have to write the whole thing. You can just give me line numbers, which line numbers will get executed. Pragya, take a look at it again. In this program, do you think an exception will be thrown?
No, it won't.
So which all line numbers will be called?
The last, no, the 9, 20, 21, 22.
Exactly. Priyanka, you missed the 9th one. Because see, the exception was not called. It'll continue, keep on going here. It'll print this line. No catch block will get called. And it'll go ahead and continue with this one. Got it? Okay, that's fine. Now, next thing that we have, there is another exception called null pointer exception. Null pointer exception means if you are trying to something like this. Okay, string S. So in this case, guys, what's going on? So what's happening here is this is a string S. Okay, string S means you have created a variable called S, but you have not initialized it. Okay, so by default the value of the S will be null, right? because you have not initialized any value with it. Okay. Now here in this case, b is equals to s dot of contain. So what is this contain function is doing? It is saying, okay, in this s, what is, do you have a character name a? Do you have something with a? So the output is going to be a null pointer exception here, because this s is not pointing to anything. S is pointing just null. So you're trying to access something which is null right now, and you're trying to find a in it. But that's why at this point of code, a null pointer exception is thrown. Okay. Now what will happen? Now tell me, do you have a catch block to handle this exception? Which one, Priyanka? Which one? Do you have a catch block to handle this exception?
No, we don't. We don't have any catch.
Priyanka, right answer. Very good. You have a catch block. Why? Because this is throwing a null pointer exception, and any kind of exception can be stored in a bigger bucket of type exception. Very good, Priyanka. Awesome. Are you getting it, Ravi and Abhinav? See, this is throwing a null pointer exception. I completely agree with you. You don't have a catch block saying null pointer exception, but you have a bigger bucket which can handle any kind of exception. So in this case, this piece of the code will get executed and it will go ahead and run the rest of the program. Did you get it? Abhinav and Ravi, did you get it? So what will be the output of the program? This particular, at this line number, this exception will be thrown, and this particular catch block will not get executed because it only handles DML. But this handles every kind of exception. So this particular catch block will get called, and then the rest of the program will get executed. So line number 20, 23, 24, and 25. Okay, so if I go ahead and execute, do I have typical? Oh yeah, this was thinking. Yeah, I completely forgot we have this line as well. So this particular line will get executed, an exception is thrown, so the exception catch block will go called, and then the rest of the lines. Anyone has any questions? What's going on with Ravi? He's coming back, going back. What's going on? Okay, that's what. Now next thing that we have is, let's say guys, if I have a catch, first of all, is this allowed? Priyanka, you and Abhinav stay close by, right? Once I upload the video, try to help him with this catch exception stuff, okay? It's interesting. It's a very interesting topic, okay? So it'll be repetition for you, but it'll also help you to understand things better. So now, first of all, tell me, did I do everything right? Is it allowed? If yes or no? Why, Priyanka? Exactly. Abhinav, do you think what is wrong here in the program? मैंने बुलाया इसमें डाल दूंगी उसे निकाल लेते हैं Abhinav, do you see any fault in this program? See here the problem is this particular code is throwing a null pointer exception, okay, but you're putting a null pointer which is a smaller bucket before this big bucket. So this piece of code is never going to execute because everything will be caught by this exception. So if you want this particular thing to get executed, this will not even, this program is synthetically wrong. Okay, it's wrong. The program is wrong. Okay, which is all this null, because it's telling you that you're putting a null pointer exception, which is a smaller bucket after a bigger bucket. Nothing will ever get caught here. Everything will be caught by this one. So this piece of code will never get executed. Now, if I do something like this, now tell me what's going to be the output of the program. Which all line number will get printed here? So you're saying line number 20. Okay, line number 9. Ravi, what's going on? Are you playing with us? Coming back and forth? 29, 30, 31. Very good, Priyanka. Very good. This will not get printed because there is a catch block which handles this one. Okay? Abhinav, are you following? Abhinav, any comments? No idea, Abhinav, why you're not able to. Can you hear me now? Abhinav, can you hear me? Okay, so now what we have here is we have created this particular null pointer exception because this particular piece of code has shown an exception of type null. Okay, so that's why we have thrown the null exception here. Okay, next thing that we have is an exception of type query exception, and we'll see what it is. Okay, any questions so far here? Guys, can you hear me? Priyanka, Ravi, Abhinav, can you hear me? Okay, so now this is the exception. Now next thing is now this particular, what's happening here? Okay, good Abhinav. Okay, now the next thing that we have is we can go to the try block here, and this is particular, I'm trying to retrieve, this is a list of merchandise item. __ C. Select name from merchandise __ C, where name is equals to XYZ. Okay, and then I am going to go ahead and say lm dot of size. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and say okay. Now here guys, what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to go ahead and I'm trying to find an element with a size x with the name xyz, but in our merchandise you do not have anything with the name xyz. Okay, there is nothing with the name of xyz. So now what's going to happen here is if you go ahead and execute this program, wait a minute, let me just get rid of this. Try. Now let's see what happens now. So execute this one. The size is going to be 0 because you're trying to access something which is of type which is not returning anything. Okay, you're trying to access something which is not going to go ahead and so here we're going to go ahead and assign this into a list. If you're seeing if this particular thing is there is a if there is an XYZ with the name of if there is a merchandise item with the name of XYZ, put it into this list. Okay, then we're grabbing the size and we don't have any element with this name, so the size is equals to 0. But if here if I put something called as limit 1 means if it's there then go ahead and return me the first element. So this is not going to return you a list, it's going to return you of type merchandise. Okay, and then let's see what happens. So it's going to go ahead and try return you object of if there is an XYZ element. You know that there is no XYZ, so that's why this list of the size of the list was 0. Now you're trying to say select name from merchandise where name is equals to XYZ and limit 1 means give me the first element here. Okay, what we're trying to do is we're going to go ahead and trying whatever the item got returned, I'm trying to put it into this merchandise object called lm, and let's see if this execute goes. So now in this case you are getting an exception of type query exception. Okay, so whatever I'm going to write it here, whatever I'm going to write after this will not get executed, right? Because an exception is thrown from that item, and that's why if I go ahead and say hello, so there is no this because this particular even these last two lines are fine. This is throwing you a query exception because you're trying to put an element which is not returned into a merchandise object. That's why it gave you an exception. Okay, go ahead and execute this one and it gave you a query exception and it did not run the last two lines. So now what I'm going to do, how can I handle this exception? I know that this piece of code might result into a problem, so I'm going to put this in the try, in the try block. Okay, and then and what kind of code, what kind of exception it is thrown? So it's a query exception. Okay, now what do you think is going to be the output of the program? Ravi, think about it again. Priyanka. Priyanka, what do you think is going to be the output? Ravi, think about it again. It's wrong. Priyanka? Why you think 7, 9 and 10 will get printed?
I mean, you have to add the in system debug line numbers. You have to add that plus the message. I mean
Why? Why?
no, I'm just asking.
No, you don't have, that's not mandatory. If you want what is the error, you can put that e dot of message, e dot of get message. If you don't want what the error message, that's fine. You don't have to write that one. That's not like a mandatory. It's not allowed. It's better you will know what kind of error it is. If you wanna know, then you can put e dot of get message. But here, what will happen is only this line will get printed. Hello, how are you? Now, but why you think this catch block will get executed? That's my question. What kind of exception is thrown here? First thing.
Because there's a DML exception.
Who told you it's a DML exception? We just saw the exception that was thrown was query exception. You have a catch block which takes a DML exception. So why you think the query exception will be put into the DML exception? Query exception is a whole different kind of exception than a DML exception. Right now, this particular line number 2 is throwing an exception of type query, right? So that's why the catch block does not make sense. So that's why, since there is no catch block which handles that query exception, this program will blow up and will not execute. It will just stop giving you a query exception because you are not handling that query exception. So here, if I go ahead and execute, it's right away going to give you query exception, and you do not have any handler or a catch block to handle that exception. That's why I'm going to give you this. But if instead of this catch block, or if I have another catch block which takes care of the query exception, in that case, that is fine, and this particular piece of code will get executed. Getting my point, guys? See, you need to understand what kind of exception it is, first thing. If you have a catch block which is of type exception, then it's fine. You can handle any kind of exception with that block. But if you do not have a catch block of that exception and you have some specific one and the exception that you're throwing is different than what the catch block is, it will never get called. So there will not be any catch block will call. Here you're throwing a query exception. Now I have a catch block which handles the query exception. So this time this piece of block will get called and then it will continue with the rest of the program. Last time we only had this block and you're throwing an exception of query. The catch block is of DML type. This catch block never got called. Will never get called because the exception you're handling is DML and the one that is getting thrown is a query. So you don't have anything, you don't have a bucket to handle it. So that's why that program, you did not have handle exception. That's why it blew up. Here you're handling the exception because you have this particular catch block. That's why. Catch query block call, hi and hello. Got it? Okay. Next thing that we have is, so you know what, now you know when the query exception will be thrown, when the null pointer exception will be thrown, when the list exception will be thrown, when the query exception will be thrown, and when the DML exception will be thrown. Then there's another one called S-object. Those are the important ones that I'm going to cover. And then we're going to see how we can create our own exception. Okay. So now next thing is, let's see. Any confusion so far, guys? Good. See the program twice before answering me the question so you don't make any mistake, because I get very upset when you give me wrong answers. Okay, you take your time but try to give me correct answer. Okay, think about all the scenarios, think about what exception, what the scenario, what the catch block, and what do you think. Okay, so now next time merchandise __ C. Oh my God. Now let's just first put this one. Why is it so slow? Okay, decimal. That's the output is decimal. Okay. So here, guys, let me see. Let me just give me a minute. I'm just trying to verify something here. Okay. Okay, guys. Now here, if I go ahead and remove this part. So what I'm trying to do here, guys, I'm trying to go ahead and return the name of the merchandise, limit 1. Means I'm just doing a simple query, okay? And I'm trying to retrieve the records from merchandise, and I'm only saying, give me first record. Give me just one record, okay? Now, in this case, you're just retrieving one column of that record, just the name, okay? I'm just returning the name. I'm not returning the price and the quantity. I'm just returning the name. But in the next statement, you're returning the name, only the name, and you're trying to get the price out of that. That is not allowed. That's an exception that gets called is of S object type, okay? Because the column that got returned was only name, okay? And then you're trying to get a price of that particular item because that column is not getting returned, then that's why this particular line is throwing an exception. And this exception is called S object exception. Okay, this exception this line will throw the S object exception. So if this line is going to throw me an S object exception, what can now tell me what's going to be the output here? And that's why the program is going to get stopped. So here, if I say system.debug, Ravi, I can't help you with that because my internet is kind of going up and down. I don't know why. How about now? Hello, hello, hello. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, so let's just see. If it again starts, I think it's, I don't know why, but internet is kind of going up and down. Like the strength is a little weak today. I don't know, for some reason. So here in the so what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to return I'm doing a select query on the merchandise object and I'm returning the name field. Okay, I'm returning the name field and the limit is 1. It means I'm only returning the first item here. Okay, merchandise underscore underscore CM. So now what is going to be here is you're trying to go ahead and give you the merchandise item decimal INV is equals to M dot of price underscore underscore C. So what it is here, M is basically, this is the whole thing and it's going to give you only the price. Okay, now decimal INV is equals to M dot of price. So you're trying to call the price column when you're only getting the name column. That's why this line is going to throw an exception, and that's why this particular will never get executed and it will throw you an exception. Are you getting my point? And the exception that will be thrown is of S object type. So if you wanted to run this program smoothly, what do you need to do? You need to have a try catch block. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say try, okay, and I'm going to put this piece of code inside of the catch block, okay, and then what kind of exception it is throwing? It's throwing an exception of S object type. If I don't remember this, that's fine. I can put anything inside of this E, and then here I can say system.debug I got caught, and then it will continue with the rest of the program. So what will be the output of this program, guys? What will be the output of the program? So which all line numbers will get printed? Abhinav, 6 and 8. Very good. 6 and 8, Pranka, will get printed. So first, because this exception is thrown because it's of type S object. And what about if I do something like this? Then what is going to be the output, guys? No, Ravi, it's not going to be an error, it will be an exception. There is a difference between error and there's an difference with exception. So don't use error and exception in the same thing, okay? Exception will be thrown because now you do not have a catch block to handle an exception of type S object. That's why this is going to go ahead and stop. Okay, because there's an SOQ, S object exception is thrown, you're not handling it, that's why it gave you a problem. Okay, there is this finally block, guys. With the try catch,
Muted. Unmuted.
okay. Can you hear me now, guys? Okay, so there was my audio was going in and out. That's why I didn't speak. So it was kind of bad connection. So here there is something called as finally block, guys. What is a finally block? Finally block is a piece of code that will always execute no matter what. So you know that catch block will only get executed if an exception occurred, right? And if that exception is of type there or the generic type. So catch block will only occur in case of an exception is thrown. But the finally block will execute no matter what. So what is the purpose of the finally block? So when, let's say, you're making a database connection or anything like that, okay, and you wanted to make sure everything gets cleaned up or resources are released, you write stuff in the finally block. Okay, so whatever the case is, no matter if the exception occurred or if the exception didn't occur, in both the cases, the finally block will run. Okay, so finally block is a piece of code that will execute no matter what. So here, if I go ahead and you can have, and the try catch, in the case of the try catch, you must have either a catch block or a finally block along with the type try. You cannot just have a try catch. You cannot just have a try. You either need to have a try with the catch, or you can have try with the finally, or you can have try with the catch and try with the finally, both together. Okay, so just like here, I'm going to say Abhinav, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me, guys? Okay, so in this case the finally block will get executed no matter what. So if I go ahead and execute this one, so the exception was thrown, that will get handled and then finally block. Even if the exception was not thrown, still the finally block will get called. So finally block will get called no matter what. Okay, no matter if the exception occurred or if the exception didn't occur, it will get called. Guys, there is an internet connection.
Muted. Unmuted.
Okay, so now this is the finally block. It will get executed no matter what. In this case, an exception is thrown. If this particular block will get executed, even if the exception was not thrown, that piece of code will still get executed. Okay.